In patch 3.0, Genshin developers introduced a new element to the game, Dendro. Despite being initially welcomed with some skepticism due to how innovative and somewhat hard to analyze it was, Dendro has managed to settle itself as a staple in the meta around Nahita's release, so when a character who could fully show the limits of the element came out. As a whole, Dendro was the result of the experience Genshin developers have accumulated over the last 2 years, as they picked some flawed pre-existent concepts and started working from that basis to create the new elemental reactions that made Dendro so powerful. In this video, I'll go through what exactly makes Dendro so good from a design standpoint, and why we should expect more great things going forward from Genshin in terms of kit designs. The greatest achievement about Dendro is how developers were able to create fully coherent transformative reactions that finally fulfilled its purpose. To those unaware of what transformative reactions are, they're reactions that deal their own distinct damage, independent from the characteristics of the move that procced it. All new elemental reactions scale off elemental mastery, but unlike amplifying reactions such as Vaporize or Melt, who are damage multipliers, and as such also benefit from things like crit and damage buffs, transformative reactions exclusively benefit from elemental mastery. In the early stages of the game, developers tried to balance this difference between these two reaction types by making the elemental mastery scaling much higher on transformatives than amplifying, and by giving them a base damage value that varies depending on your character level and the reaction itself. Despite this, they still felt quite weak. The whole idea around transformative reactions is that you can theoretically throw away all your crit, attack, damage buff scaling builds, so a structure that benefits hugely from high investment, and replace them with elemental mastery builds, which are typically achievable with great results at low investment. Of course, it would be absurd to expect transformative reactions to match the high investment output of amplifying reactions, but based on how the developers designed them, it would be fair to expect transformatives to be at least comparable at low investment. The issue was that this just wasn't the case, as Overload and Electrocharge specifically just weren't worth trading your raw damage builds for. What made these reactions flawed is the fact that you couldn't control who proc them. Reactions generally involve two elements, one of them being the enabler and one of them being the proc. The proc is basically the element whose application unleashes the reaction. Reaction damage scales off the proc's elemental mastery. Not being able to control who procs the reaction made investing on elemental mastery on a specific character to increase its damage less convenient, as in realistic scenarios you would only end up buffing 50% or less of the total transformative reaction damage dealt by a team. However, I think MiHoYo was well aware of this issue, as they also gave us a key to solve it through Swirl. Swirl is a reaction that involves Anemo and one element between Pyro, Cryo, Electro or Hydro. In Swirl's case, Anemo is always the proc, as it's an element who doesn't leave auras on opponents when applied. In basic terms, Swirl propagates the elements Anemo reacted with towards all of the opponents on a medium, circular range, and deals some damage on top of that. The twist is that the Anemo character who did the Swirl now owns the element that is being propagated, meaning every reaction this element's application will proc will scale off the Anemo's stats. This aspect is typically called a chain reaction. Anemo characters, especially after the 1.6 patch, so when this Swirl damage got buffed, are generally built with elemental mastery artifacts, as their raw damage builds are not that great in most scenarios in comparison. What this means is that through Swirls, players had a way to control the proc for reactions such as Electrocharge and Overload, and the proc also happened to be a high elemental mastery character in this case. Ideal, isn't it? Well, not totally. The whole mechanism still had issues, like weak performance in single target scenarios due to how Swirl works, and the overall damage share of the reactions still being a minor part of the team's total damage. But at the very least, that's an environment where Overload and Electrocharge felt useful. With Dendro, the developers took transformative reactions flaws and found a clever way to solve it. Dendro's transformative reactions are Burning, Bloom, Burgeon and Hyperbloom. Let's focalize on Bloom. Bloom is a reaction that, at face value, has the same main issues Overload and Electrocharge have. It's a reaction between Hydro and Dendro, where you can't really control the proc in real game scenarios. Bloom generates a seed, which will either explode after 6 seconds, or immediately after creation if there are already 5 seeds on field. However, ignoring Nido's existence for a second, it's a reaction whose true potential lies in how it can enable other transformative reactions, namely Burgeon and Hyperbloom, which are activated and deal damage to opponents whenever Pyro or Electro respectively hit the seeds. This is theoretically a one-element elemental reaction, as it only involves one element hitting the seed. What this means is that, by maximizing the elemental mastery of Electro or Pyro characters on the team, you can buff 100% of the transformative reaction damage dealt by your composition, which is a huge improvement compared to the past. Not only that, but both Burgeon and Hyperbloom have way higher base damage than the previous strongest transformative reaction, Overload. Conceptually, this was very strong right off the bat, but it only became obvious when we got a great Dendro applicator in Nahida. The result was that Hyperbloom and Burgeon started doing enough damage to replace the output of a decently invested carry, and as such, fulfilled the purpose of a transformative reaction. Dendro also introduced new amplifying reactions. Unlike transformative reactions, amplifying ones already had staples in the meta, with Vaporize and Melt providing amazing results for both front-loaded and sustained damage scenarios alike. However, an issue with these high-grow damage setups is that most of them had a similar structure, as characters like Bennett, and the one between Sucrose and Kazuha were often a requirement to achieve those great results. Bennett's case was especially egregious, as MiHoYo made it incredibly easy for him to succeed on teams by giving off-field characters the capability to snapshot his buffs, meaning you could take advantage of a massive buffer designed for on-field characters with multiple characters simultaneously instead. Dendro amplifying reactions go against this nature completely, in an attempt to diminish Bennett's impact on the meta. From a monetary standpoint, I doubt MiHoYo was happy about an easily obtainable 4-star ending up as a universal support that will make your team better regardless of if you're free-to-play or a whale, and as a result, some mechanics that align with what Dendro does made it impossible for Bennett to succeed in the new niche. First and foremost, MiHoYo stopped adding snapshot to characters long before Dendro's release, so for example a character like Yae, who's now one of the best units for Dendro teams, didn't exactly fit with Bennett that well. Secondarily, Dendro-tied units in particular have all had some form of elemental mastery based scaling, which lowered the impact a massive attack buff could have on them. For this reason, Dendro teams basically never have a hypercarry structure, since the niche just lacks the tools to hyperbuff a unit. You won't see an Alhaitham reaching the same damage output as Hutao in her hyper variants. That's just not how Dendro is designed to work. As a proof of this, their amplifying reaction, namely Quicken, is meant to magnify the damage of a whole team, rather than a single unit, as opposed to Melt and Vaporize, whose gauge limitations often only allow them to be procced consistently by a specific character on the team. Quicken is a reaction between Electro and Dendro, which puts a status on opponents. While under this status, every application of Electro or Dendro on said opponents will proc Spread or Aggravate respectively, which will increase the damage of the move that procced it by an amount which scales up with Elemental Mastery investment. There is no team-wide cooldown for this reaction, as its limit entirely depends on the internal cooldown of the characters on the team. Basically, it freely allows you to boost the damage output on a team-wide scale. This sort of replicates the impact Bennett had on national teams I spoke about previously, as in that case, damage was also getting increased on a team-wide scale thanks to Snapshot. Basically, MiHoYo created a clever alternative for Dendro teams, which doesn't rely on the old, heavily contested characters to succeed. This overall higher reliance on elemental mastery for characters even gave players the opportunity to mix transformative and amplifying reactions on a team, while getting decent to high results out of both. For example through Quickbloom, a composition that mixes Quicken and Hyperbloom, and as such, increases the investment ceiling of standard Hyperbloom teams. Another sign of MiHoYo improving things can be found in the Deepwood artifact set. This set reduces resistance to Dendro on opponents who are hit by the elemental skill or burst of the character who holds it for 8 seconds. Dendro resistance affects the damage of all Dendro-based reactions. This was a way for MiHoYo to create an alternative to the Viridescent Veneer set, specifically for Dendro teams. There is a difference, however. The Deepwood set can be procced off-field, while the Viridescent Veneer can't. This might seem insignificant at face value, but it gives Deepwood a real advantage in multi-wave scenarios where you can't swap out midway through rotations. It's not an enormous deal, but it's yet another example of MiHoYo doing things very well with Dendro. For all of these reasons, Dendro ended up becoming one of the funniest and most practical elements to play with in my case, giving me a level of flexibility I just don't experience on most other teams, while still being just as powerful as them, if not more. I think this is a sign of MiHoYo understanding their own game mechanics better and better, and improving kits and combat designs compared to the past as a result. So in my opinion, we can expect this kind of treatment for future non-Dendro releases as well. I'm done for today. As always, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. See you next time!